Hey guys, what's up? Eric for President here. Our first story today is just fantastic news for every consumer of VR. As you all know, Vader Immortal episodes 1, 2, and 3 have been Oculus exclusives for the Rift and Quest platforms, but officially starting this summer, it will now also be available on the PSVR, which makes me think of quite a few things to talk about. This was all announced on May the 4th be with you, a pretty smart marketing move on the developer's Twitter saying, just announced Vader Immortal, a Star Wars VR series, is coming to PlayStation VR. Step into Darth Vader's fortress and learn what secrets it holds with the complete series launching this summer. Now you may remember something that we talked about last year, actually in the summer of last year, about Jason Rubin wanting to partner more with Sony in trade titles. In a direct interview with Kotaku, he specifically stated that he wanted to trade titles and wants to open up about partnering. Now being honest, I think this is tremendous news. I think it's being underplayed by some people, but to start with the game itself, I think on a pro, it is one of the best games for newcomers to start playing VR. It is, yes, it's on a rails experience, but between this and Beat Saber, I think those are two must-plays along with Super Hot for new VR users, and Vader Immortal being on the PSVR is a great way for more people to experience a great starting place in VR. I do know that it does have its cons. The game is fairly on rails. I thought episode 1 was the best and it did deteriorate with episodes 2 and 3. However, it being on the PSVR opens up so many possibilities now for PSVR titles to make it to Oculus, for Oculus titles to go to PSVR. Overall, exclusive games I think are no-win situations for the consumer, and seeing openness like this where Oculus exclusives are now not as much anymore, I think it's a win that we really should praise and just be happy about. Now our second story is a little scary to some because it's such a beloved platform, but we need to talk about the recent news involving SideQuest. Now SideQuest, for those not familiar with it, it is a easier, simplified way to install unofficial apps and games onto the Oculus Quest. Honestly, at this point, SideQuest accounts for probably 70%, including virtual desktop, of my Oculus Quest use. It is incredibly important to the Oculus Quest platform. In some bad news over Reddit, in a post by Shakyamuni, it states that it's my unfortunate responsibility to announce that future SideQuest versions will no longer be open source. SideQuest development will go on as strong as always, but work will continue in private repositories instead of public ones. Piracy is also heavily mentioned in here with, quote, we recently introduced SafeSide as a way to protect users from pirated and malicious content. We have seen a number of folks of SideQuest created recently circumventing SafeSide to facilitate piracy. This was possible for an average developer in part because the code was open source. Now we know Facebook and Oculus is very strict and very clear on their guidelines for illicit modding, for cheating and piracy, and while SideQuest does none of those, they have to straddle a fine line on what users can do on their platform to mitigate that risk. Making from open source to closed source, while not the best for everybody, is the smart move here for the long-term success of SideQuest. A couple points here that you do need to know is for the average user, this is not going to affect you at all. It may make downloading some applications and some games a little harder, troubleshooting may be a little harder, but in fact the average user is probably going to not notice this at all. Now SideQuest in my mind is a godsend. It is the number one thing I use for the Quest. It accounts for 70% of probably my used apps on it. I do not think the Oculus Quest would be the same platform without SideQuest, and no matter how many tutorials out there, people who are not using it, you are missing out. However, SideQuest has to do these types of things because they mitigate a lot of risk. Now, there is a way for them to really make it so they're not vulnerable. They've done a great job at working with Oculus and working with Facebook, but one slip up, one bad user, well, the fine line and the fine print of Oculus changes daily. Their piracy, their anti-cheat, their illicit modding, all the things they don't want, they could change their opinion on a dime if someone abuses SideQuest, and they're doing the best they can to mitigate that. I back this decision. It may not be best for everyone, but I think closing it up is just better for the longevity of the Oculus Quest. But let's break up the bad news with our next story and go into something a little bit more positive and kind of a refresher. But if you haven't seen Upload, a new Amazon Prime show, well, it's about VR, it's pretty awesome, and you should be watching it. Upload is set in a future where humans are able to upload themselves into their preferred choice of virtual reality afterlife in basically virtual reality hotels. When a character's self-driving car crashes, his high-maintenance girlfriend uploads him permanently into Nora's VR world, his girlfriend's family's digital afterlife. It's really cool to see VR and television, especially when done very well with a 97% rating on Google. Now, I've already binged this entire show. I did it in 2 days. It is a fantastic show that every episode actually kept making me more invested, and I liked it better with each episode. The comedy's on point. I'm not laughing out loud ever on the show, but it's a constant smile, and that's as much as I can ask for in a lot of comedies these days. I think what makes me the happiest here and why I recommend to show it to your friends and to try it out for yourself is that virtual reality shows a lot of times can be super negative or they can be super gimmicky. Sometimes just TV shows throw on the virtual reality tag and expect it to hit. This one dives into some real topics, some real cool, interesting topics with a lot of character development. It's done well, they put the effort in, and I think it makes virtual reality very interesting to the public, and I applaud shows like this. So go check it out if you haven't. Now moving on, our next story, there is some interesting data that's shown up on Steam regarding Half-Life Alyx sales and headset users that I think has a lot of implications. Not only do the numbers look good, but there's a lot left on the tables that I think developers are now going to see, which may lead to some bigger and better games for us all. In an article by Ben Lang of Road to VR, an analysis shows Half-Life Alyx adds nearly 1 million VR users to Steam in a record game. This was in fact nearly triple the amount of the previous largest monthly game. The article explains how Steam data is typically behind a little bit as to why we are just getting these numbers now, and these do account for just headsets connected, not new headsets, as some people could have theirs unplugged. Now these are just estimated numbers by Road to VR, but I do find them to be a highly credible source and they do their research, especially Ben Lang, so I trust these numbers to a degree, and it's estimated that around 950,000 headsets were added in April, leading to a total of 2.7 million headsets. Now, a lot of people saw these numbers and take it away that VR is not dying, it's exponentially growing, and it's doing better than ever in certain light. And that is 100% true and a valid takeaway, but something that I don't think gets enough attention is the pot of gold that developers are sitting on. Now, like Ben Lang said, only connected headsets are counted, and there are probably plenty of headsets that are just not connected right now, with people waiting for that game that really speaks to them to plug in their headset and play again. And developers need to take note of this, because along with that stat and the fact that there's just not that many titles that get a lot of visibility on launch each month, it would behoove a lot of developers to market hard, gain a lot of visibility and a lot of community support on their launches, because there is a large user base ready to plug in their headsets, ready to play their games, and ready to try something new if it's visible and presented to them the right way. That's something I took from this. Let me know your thoughts. And our final story revolves around Sony again, with some finger tracking controllers that I could not be more excited to see, at least in the prototype phase, because Sony is showing that they really want to be a competitor in the VR market, and I would love anyone to challenge Oculus's status quo. A video that coincides with a new research paper titled Evaluation of Machine Learning Techniques for Hand Pose Estimation on Handheld Devices with Proximity Sensor, it's a mouthful, shows us a prototype of a finger tracking controller very similar to the Valve Index controller. With these sensors in the controllers, they're able to sense grasp with all fingers, as well as individual finger movements. What I really like about these controllers, or at least the prototype for the controllers, is the lacking or not needing external sensors. All the sensors are in the controllers themselves. That decreases friction for adoption rates on this, and anything decreasing friction in the VR scene, I am all for. We see it a little bit in action throughout the video, and honestly, it looks pretty impressive. Now, we do know the PSVR 2 is not going to coincide with the launch of the PS5. It is likely we will not see any PSVR 2 this year, hopefully something next year, but all the leaked patents, the things, design patents around, the schematics that we've seen, the prototypes for these controllers, it's really showing that PSVR 2 is ready to be a powerhouse in the VR scene, more than it so is already, because it's already the most popular headset next to the Oculus Quest. And I am just happy to see another competitor, because when I started with VR, I thought the HTC Vive and HTC were going to be the main competitors. It's going to be HTC versus Oculus, and honestly, I'm rooting for Sony right now to really come in, because HTC is it's disappointing me. But that's it for today, guys. I'll see you on the next one, VR Space Cowboys.
Bang.